Welcome to this space where we will transform fear and anxiety into powerful tools for personal growth. In this video, you will discover how to face fear and overcome anxiety through strategies inspired by Stoicism, an ancient philosophy that teaches us to cultivate inner strength and face life's challenges with serenity and determination. In a world full of uncertainties and constant pressures, learning to manage our emotions is essential for living a fulfilling and conscious life. Fear, that sensation that often paralyzes us and prevents us from taking action, can become a source of positive energy if we approach it with the right mindset. On the other hand, anxiety, a natural response to stressful situations, can become overwhelming and limit our possibilities, robbing us of peace. That is why, in this content, we will delve into how the Stoic approach helps us transform these negative emotions into opportunities for growth and self-discovery. Throughout the video, we will explore various techniques and practical exercises that will help you focus on what you can truly control, freeing yourself from the influence of fear and anxiety. We will discuss the importance of acceptance, self-control, and emotional discipline, fundamental pillars that will help you rebuild your inner strength. Additionally, we will analyze how small changes in our daily perspective can make a huge difference in how we live and face the challenges that arise. Our goal is to provide you with effective tools so you can reconnect with your true potential and learn to see every obstacle as an opportunity for growth. If you seek real transformation in your emotional well-being, this video will accompany you on the journey toward a life without limitations based on personal development and the teachings of Stoicism. Get ready to take the first step and discover how facing fear can be the key to freeing yourself from anxiety and achieving a full and balanced existence. Lesson 1. We will address a revolutionary truth. Fear is, in essence, a mental construct. Have you ever stopped to think that the fear that paralyzes you does not tangibly exist in the external world, but is instead the result of your own interpretations and judgments? Imagine for a moment that what you feel when facing the unknown is like a shadow projected by your mind, an illusion created from expectations and narratives you have woven yourself. This idea, as profound as it is liberating, invites us to rethink our relationship with fear and discover that, in reality, we have the power to dismantle its structures. I recall the teaching of Epictetus, who wisely stated, "It is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of them." With these words, we are called to an exercise of introspection to question every negative judgment we make about a situation and recognize that we often fear more the idea we have of something rather than the thing itself. It is as if, instead of facing an external threat, we are battling ghosts created within us, ghosts that disappear when we understand their true nature. Think of someone who, as night falls, is overwhelmed by feelings of insecurity and anxiety. That darkness is merely an excuse for the mind to trigger alarms and anticipate non-existent dangers. Similarly, Stoic philosophy teaches us to distinguish between reality and unfounded fears, to recognize that panic is often nothing more than a reflection of our own distorted beliefs. Seneca, another great Stoic master, reminded us that most of our fears never materialize. They are mere shadows that dissipate when we shine the light of reason upon them. Visualize a common situation, such as preparing for a job interview. Anxiety may cloud your judgment, making you imagine catastrophic scenarios, guaranteed rejection, failure in every response, the fear of not being good enough. However, by applying the Stoic perspective, you can observe that the interview itself is not the problem. It is the stories your mind tells you about what could go wrong. Once you realize that these fears are mental constructs, you empower yourself to act with greater calm and authenticity. This shift in focus allows you to concentrate on what you can truly control: your preparation, your attitude, your ability to respond clearly. The key is understanding that our emotions are largely the result of our own interpretations. By separating what is within our control from what is not, we begin to dismantle fear piece by piece, recognizing that what we truly fear are our own perceptions, not objective reality. It is in that moment of recognition that change is born, when we cease to be prisoners of our emotions and become the architects of our own experience. Throughout this lesson, I invite you to look at yourself honestly and ask, what judgments have I constructed that prevent me from seeing reality clearly? Every time you face a situation that generates fear, remember that anxiety is merely an echo of past and future thoughts, not a concrete threat. By accepting that fear is a mental construct, you open the door to inner freedom, allowing you to act with greater serenity and effectiveness. As you close your eyes and let these words settle within you, I ask, are you ready to transform your perspective and free your mind from the chains of fear? In our next lesson, we will dive into concrete practices and exercises to help you reprogram those mental patterns so you can live with renewed confidence and the tranquility that comes from deep self-understanding. Stay tuned, because what is coming next will take you one step closer to a full life, free from the limitations that fear has imposed. Lesson 2. Imagine you are in the middle of a storm. The sky roars with thunder, the wind strikes with fury, and the rain pours down relentlessly. No matter how much you wish for the sky to clear, the storm follows its course, oblivious to your pleas. And yet, you have a choice. You can curse the tempest, despair over what is beyond your control, or you can seek shelter, cover yourself, and wait calmly for it to pass. This is the essence of one of Stoicism's most powerful teachings: control what you can, accept what you cannot. Epictetus put it best: some things are up to us and some things are not. If we learn to distinguish between the two, no one can harm us. Here lies a fundamental key to overcoming anxiety and fear. We worry about what might happen, about what others think of us, about the unexpected changes that shake our lives. But if we truly analyze it, how much of that is actually in our hands? Most of our anxieties stem from clinging to the uncontrollable, from wanting to govern the ocean with our hands instead of learning to navigate it. Imagine you are waiting for a response about a job opportunity that could change your life. You have prepared your resume, practiced for the interview, done everything within your power, and yet uncertainty consumes you. But if you apply a Stoic mindset, you will realize that at this point, worrying is wasted energy. The outcome is no longer in your hands. The only thing you can control is your reaction, your attitude, and your preparation for whatever comes next, regardless of the result. Seneca reminds us that fortune behaves as she pleases, not as we desire. And this is not a reason for frustration, but for freedom. Because when we stop resisting the inevitable, when we accept what is beyond our control, we find peace. It is not resignation, nor is it indifference. It is emotional intelligence at its highest level. It is understanding that the only thing we truly possess is our mind, our actions, and our decisions. Now, acceptance does not mean surrender. It does not mean sitting idly by in the face of adversity. It means channeling our energy into what we can actually change. If you face an illness, you cannot change the diagnosis, but you can decide how to face it. If a relationship ends, you cannot force the other person to stay, but you can choose to heal and move forward. If the world collapses around you, you still have the power to decide how to respond. True strength does not lie in controlling the universe, but in mastering the mind that interprets it. And once you understand this, fear loses its grip on you. Anxiety fades when you realize that you do not need everything to go as planned. You only need to be ready for any outcome. Now tell me, how many times have you worried about something you could not change? How many times have you exhausted yourself fighting against the tide instead of learning to float? In the next lesson, we will dive into practical techniques to train your mind in the Stoic discipline, so that every day brings you closer to the serenity that only those who understand this principle can attain. The storm will not stop, but you will learn to walk through the rain without fear. Lesson 3. Imagine standing in total darkness, where every shadow seems like a threat and every sound is amplified in your mind as a warning of danger. Fear is like this. It seeps into the darkest corners of our consciousness, making us see monsters where there is only air. But what if there was a shield against it? Not a weapon, not an escape, but an antidote that dissolves it at its root. The Stoics discovered it centuries ago. Virtue is the answer. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, wrote in his Meditations, "If it is within your power, why fear it? If it is not within your power, why worry about it?" These words hold profound wisdom. Fear does not vanish by mere will, but through inner strength. And inner strength is not found in luck or circumstances, but in the practice of virtue. For the Stoics, virtue was not just an abstract concept, but the foundation of an unshakable life. Wisdom allows us to distinguish what deserves our concern from what we should let go of. Justice gives us the conviction to act rightly, without fear of others' judgment. Courage teaches us that fear is not a reason to stop, but a sign of where we must move forward. And temperance grants us the discipline not to be carried away by panic, but to remain firm, even in the storm. Imagine someone facing a terrifying decision: a career change, the end of a relationship, the risk of starting over. The mind races, conjuring the worst scenarios. But in that moment, if wisdom guides their thoughts, they will see that there are no guarantees in life, only the possibility of acting with integrity. If justice governs their heart, they will know that doing what is right is more important than doing what is easy. If courage is present, they will take the step even as their legs tremble. And if temperance accompanies them, their fear will not dominate them, but will instead push them to act with clarity. Virtue is the foundation of tranquility. A virtuous person does not fear losing everything because they understand that the only thing they truly possess is their character. A virtuous person is not afraid of death because they know that living with honor is more important than prolonging existence. A virtuous person is not paralyzed by uncertainty because their internal compass always guides them. Now tell me, what would you do if you knew that fear had no power over you? In the next lesson, we will explore how to cultivate these virtues in daily life so that fear is no longer a wall but a door to greatness. Because the true antidote to fear is not strength or escape but character forged in virtue. Lesson 4. Fear is a beast that feeds on our inaction. It grows stronger in the silence of doubt, in sleepless nights where we imagine the worst outcomes, in the days we postpone decisions because the mere act of taking a step terrifies us. But there is a secret the Stoics discovered centuries ago. The only way to weaken fear is to move toward it. Epictetus expressed it clearly. It is not death or pain that should be feared, but the fear of death and pain. The true prison is not the situation we face, but the paralysis we impose on ourselves by not acting. We convince ourselves that something is too difficult, too dangerous, too uncertain, and without realizing it, we become prisoners of our own assumptions. But what happens when we dare to challenge that fear? We discover that its power was an illusion, that its strength depended only on our passivity. Think about the first time you spoke in public. Your voice trembled, your heart pounded, and your mind was filled with scenarios where everything went wrong. But when you took the first step, when you opened your mouth and let the words flow, the terror began to fade. You realized that fear was not bigger than you. Or recall that difficult conversation you postponed over and over until you finally decided to speak. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but once you took the step, you saw that the anticipation was worse than the reality. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone when he wrote in his Meditations. If you encounter a difficulty, remember that it is the raw material with which you forge your virtue. Obstacles are not chains, but the substance from which resilience is built. If you run away, you reinforce the idea that you cannot handle the situation. If you act, even with fear, you train your mind to endure, to adapt, to strengthen. Action is the best teacher because it leaves no room for speculation, only experience. Now imagine standing before that challenge you've been avoiding. You feel the weight of fear in your chest, the uncertainty clouding your thoughts. But instead of stepping back, instead of analyzing every possible outcome to exhaustion, you take a step, and then another. And with each movement, the burden grows lighter because you are no longer a victim of your thoughts but an agent of your own destiny. Resilience is not found in theory but in practice. It's not about feeling brave before acting, but about acting before feeling brave. In the next lesson, we will explore how to make action a habit, how to train the mind to move forward even when fear whispers for you to stop. Because if the Stoics taught us anything, It's this: fear only has power over those who choose not to face what they fear. Lesson 5. Fear is a whisper in the mind that stops us before we take the first step. It is the guardian of the comfort zone, the architect of our doubts, the voice that asks, "What if you fail?" But what few tell us is that fear is not just an obstacle. It is a teacher in disguise. Every fear we face is an opportunity to know ourselves better, to refine our inner strength, and to expand the limits of what we thought was possible. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." These words contain a deep truth. What we fear is not a barrier but a doorway. On the other side of fear lies the version of ourselves we have yet to meet. Not the one who doubts, not the one who hesitates, but the one who has learned to turn uncertainty into wisdom. Think of a moment in your life when fear paralyzed you. Maybe it was the fear of rejection, of failure, of the unknown. Perhaps you avoided making a decision, speaking up in an important meeting, or starting a project because the possibility of failure was too overwhelming. But now, looking back, what do you see? Wasn't that fear in reality an opportunity in disguise? Maybe if you had taken that step earlier, you would have learned sooner. Perhaps if you had spoken up, you would have discovered that your voice had more power than you thought. Stoicism teaches us that fear is a signal. Not a signal to run away, but a signal that there is something we need to explore. If something causes us fear, it means there is something we do not fully understand, something that challenges us, something that invites us to grow. Epictetus reminds us it is not what happens to us, but how we interpret it that affects us. And many times we interpret fear as a limit when it is actually an indication that we are standing before a chance to grow. When we see fear in this way, it stops being a prison. It becomes a challenge. We face it not with despair but with curiosity, asking ourselves, what lies behind this? What can I learn from this feeling? And with each answer, we become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The next time you feel fear, don't immediately retreat. Observe what it is trying to teach you. Ask yourself what version of yourself is waiting on the other side. Because in the end, growth does not come from certainty but from risk. It does not come from what we avoid but from what we confront. And in the next lesson, we will explore how to make fear an ally, how to learn to use it to our advantage instead of letting it control us. Because fear, when understood correctly, is not an enemy, it is the path. Lesson 6. The way we see the world defines how we live in it. Two people can experience the same situation and react in completely different ways. One is paralyzed, filled with fear and uncertainty. The other moves forward with determination, seeing an opportunity where others only see obstacles. What sets them apart? It is not the external reality, but the perspective with which they face adversity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are troubled by something external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." The key is there. Fear does not come from the situation, but from the interpretation we give it. The mind decides whether something is a threat or a challenge, a punishment or a learning opportunity. Perspective is everything. Imagine a sailor caught in a storm at sea. An inexperienced man will see the dark sky, the violent waves, and the roar of the wind as signs of his imminent destruction. But an experienced navigator sees the same storm and, instead of surrendering, adjusts the sails, corrects the course, and adapts to the tempest. Not because the storm is any less fierce, but because his way of seeing it is different. He does not perceive it as his end, but as a test of his skill and resilience. The same thing happens in our lives. When we face problems, our minds tend to label them as injustices or tragedies. We ask ourselves, why me? Why now? How will I endure this? But the Stoics invite us to ask a different question: what can I learn from this? Adversity is not a sentence, it is an opportunity to train our minds, expand our resilience, and refine our character. Epictetus reminds us we cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. And here is where our true power lies. Changing perspective does not mean ignoring difficulty, it means seeing it with different eyes. It does not mean minimizing fear, but understanding that every fear contains a hidden lesson. Think of a recent failure. Maybe a rejection, a missed opportunity, a mistake you wish you had not made. Now, instead of lamenting it, imagine examining it from another perspective. Instead of asking why it happened, ask yourself what you can learn from it. How can that experience make you stronger? How can you use it to prepare yourself better for the future? The difference between a burden and a lesson is not the situation itself, but how you interpret it. Perspective defines our experience of life. What we believe defeats us actually shapes us. What we think holds us back actually strengthens us. In the next lesson, we will explore how to apply this mindset in daily life, how to train our minds to see adversity not as an enemy but as a teacher. Because in the end, reality does not define us. Our perspective does. Lesson 7. True freedom is not found in the absence of obstacles, but in the ability to govern ourselves in the midst of them. It is not the external world that chains us, but our own lack of control over our emotions and desires. In a single moment of anger, we can destroy relationships that took years to build. In a moment of fear, we can lose opportunities that will never return. Self-discipline is the shield against these impulses. It is the key that frees us from being slaves to our reactions and makes us masters of our own destiny. Epictetus put it clearly, no man is free if he is not master of himself. Because what good is it to claim independence if our emotions control us? If fear dictates our steps, if comfort prevents us from moving forward, if desire drags us like an overflowing river. Self-discipline is not a restriction, it is a declaration of power. It is proof that we are more than our fleeting emotions, that we can resist the temptation of immediate pleasure in favor of long-term greatness. Imagine a warrior in the heat of battle. A man without training, dominated by panic, becomes easy prey. His movements are erratic, his mind is clouded, his hands tremble. But the one who has spent years perfecting his art, who has learned to control his breathing, to master his fear, to move with calculated precision, that is the one who remains standing when the storm has passed. Life is no different. Every day is a battle against our inner weaknesses, and the only way to emerge victorious is through constant practice. Seneca warns us, we cannot choose our circumstances, but we can prepare for them. Self-discipline does not arise in the moment of crisis, but in the days before, in every seemingly insignificant decision we make. It is waking up early when we would rather sleep. It is saying no to what we know weakens us. It is doing the right thing when no one is watching. These small acts of self-control build the strength needed to face any challenge. Every time we choose discipline over indulgence, every time we resist the temptation to act on impulse, we reinforce our character. We become stronger, more resilient, less vulnerable to life's ups and downs. And when fear tries to take control, it will no longer have the same power over us. Not because fear disappears, but because we will have learned to face it with a steady mind and an unbreakable will. In the next lesson, we will explore how to strengthen this discipline with practical habits, how to turn self-control into second nature, how to live with the certainty that nothing external has the power to break us. Because in the end, self-discipline is not just a method for controlling fear, it is the path to true freedom. Lesson 8. We live in a world that changes with every sunrise. Nothing is fixed, nothing is guaranteed, yet we spend much of our lives fighting against this reality. We want certainty, we want security, we want tomorrow to arrive with promises of stability and control. But the universe does not work that way. Uncertainty is not an enemy to be eradicated, but an unchangeable truth that we must learn to accept. Epictetus reminds us, do not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish for events to happen as they do, and your life will go smoothly. How many times have we suffered more from our resistance to the unknown than from the events themselves? We cling to how we think things should be when life, time and again, shows us that we are not the masters of fate. Imagine a sailor setting sail without knowing the direction of the winds. He may fear the storm, he may curse the unpredictable waves, or he may adjust his sails and navigate with whatever nature offers. Life is that ocean, and we are the sailors. We cannot control every wave, but we can control our response to them. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, wrote, "If you are troubled by something external, it is not that thing which disturbs you, but your judgment about it. And you have the power to revoke that judgment at any moment." Uncertainty is not the problem. The problem is our need for certainty. Our mind fears the future because it sees it as a dark void full of threats. But the truth is, the unknown also holds possibilities, lessons, and opportunities we have yet to imagine. Think about the greatest moments of transformation in your life. How many of them arose from situations that initially filled you with fear? Perhaps an unexpected job change, a forced move, a relationship that ended when you least expected it. Looking back, you realize that uncertainty did not destroy your life, it shaped it. Accepting uncertainty does not mean resigning ourselves to chaos, it means letting go of the illusion of absolute control. It means trusting in our ability to adapt, strengthening our resilience, and embracing each day with the certainty that no matter what comes, we will be able to face it. In the next lesson, we will explore how to develop this inner strength to walk confidently amid uncertainty, how to transform fear of the future into a stoic attitude of serenity and preparedness. Because in the end, life has never been about eliminating uncertainty, it has always been about learning to live with it. Lesson 9. There is a storm outside. The wind pounds the windows with fury, the rain falls violently, and thunder rumbles in the distance. But inside a well-built fortress, the fire keeps burning, calm reigns, and nothing happening outside can disturb the security of its walls. This is the mind of someone who has learned to cultivate inner strength. The external world is unpredictable. Life throws challenges at us without warning, exposes us to fears that seem uncontrollable, and takes away what we love without asking if we are ready. But the real battle is never in what happens outside us, it is in how we choose to face it from within. Epictetus put it clearly, it is not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them. Think of someone going through a crisis, the loss of a job, an illness, an unexpected betrayal. Some collapse, consumed by anxiety and fear. Others, however, remain standing. Not because they are immune to pain, but because they have built within themselves an unshakable refuge. They have strengthened their minds in the same way a warrior strengthens his body, with discipline, with training, with a firm will not to be dragged down by circumstances. Seneca said, "Nothing happens to the wise man against his expectation. Everything happens as he foresaw it and, above all, as if he had predicted it." A person who cultivates inner strength does not expect a world without storms but prepares for them. They know that fear will come, that suffering is inevitable, but they also know that their reaction to it is theirs and theirs alone. When we cultivate a strong mind, we learn to differentiate between what is under our control and what is not. We train ourselves not to panic in the face of the unknown, not to be overcome by dread when uncertainty lurks. We become, in essence, masters of our own destiny, not because we can change the course of the world, but because nothing can take away the serenity we have forged within. Think about it. When you face difficulty, how does your mind react? Is it a safe refuge or a battlefield where fear and anguish wage an uncontrollable war? The good news is that strength can be trained. Every time you choose calm over panic, acceptance over complaint, resilience over despair, you reinforce the internal walls that will protect you from any storm. And so, when the next challenge arrives, it will not find you trembling, but standing firm with a serene gaze and an unshaken mind. In the next lesson, we will explore how this inner strength becomes the most powerful weapon against fear, how it allows us not only to withstand adversity, but to transform it into our greatest teacher. Because true security is not in avoiding problems, but in knowing that, no matter what happens, we are prepared. Lesson 10. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night, your mind trapped in a whirlwind of thoughts about the future. You wonder what will happen tomorrow, if your plans will work out, if you will lose what you love, if some misfortune is lurking in the shadows. Your body is still, lying in the darkness of the room, but your mind is racing down roads that do not yet exist. Fear slips into every thought, whispering warnings of things that may never happen. And yet here you are, a prisoner of what has not yet come to pass. The Stoics knew that the root of anguish is not in the present but in the anticipation of the future. Marcus Aurelius made it clear, if you are distressed by anything external, it is not the thing itself that troubles you, but your judgment about it. And you have the power to revoke that judgment at any moment. Anxiety is a contract we sign with the future, paying for it with our peace over things that may never occur. Look around you. How many times has the worst-case scenario you imagine actually come true? And how many times have you suffered in vain over something that never happened? The mind is an unstoppable architect of fears, projecting onto the screen of consciousness visions of pain that exist only in imagination. And yet, life is happening here, in this moment. While you fear tomorrow, the present slips through your fingers, wasted on worries that do not deserve it. Epictetus taught us that it is not the future that troubles us, but how we see it. What if, instead of projecting ourselves into the uncertain, into what we cannot control, we chose to focus on the now? Imagine walking in the rain without thinking about how long it will take to dry, eating without your mind wandering into worries, listening to someone speak without already formulating your next response in your head. Simply being. The present is the only solid ground beneath our feet. It is where real actions happen, where we make decisions, where we truly exist. You cannot live in the past because it is gone. You cannot dwell in the future because it has not yet arrived. But here, in this moment, you have everything you need. And if you learn to stay here, fear will dissolve like mist at sunrise. The next step in this journey is understanding that we must not only dwell in the present, but also find in it the serenity that anxiety about the future has stolen from us. In the next lesson, we will explore how radical acceptance of the moment can become the ultimate weapon against fear, allowing us not only to live but to live well. If this lesson has resonated with you, if at any moment you have felt that fear of the future steals your peace in the present, I want to invite you to take one more step on this Stoic path. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring these teachings that have transformed lives for centuries. Leave a like if this message has made you reflect, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. And, of course, tell me in the comments, what is the hardest thing for you to let go of about the future? How do you practice living in the present? I would love to read your perspective and build together a community of resilient minds focused on what truly matters. See you in the next lesson, where we will take another step towards strengthening our minds and freeing ourselves from the chains of fear. See you soon.